Guys, I finished. I'm done. It's over. Sort of. Not really. It's never over. But I finished The Crippled God. I finished Malazan Book of the Fallen. It took me over a year, but I did it. Let's talk about it. Wow. Hello. I'm Pete. This is the Ponderings of Pete. I talk about books. I talk about fantasy books. I talk about sci-fi books. I talk about nonfiction. I just talk about books because I like talking about books. If you're new here, welcome. This is going to be interesting. I just finished Malazan Book of the Fallen for the first time, and I have some thoughts. I did a prediction video. Boom. I will be addressing some of the predictions that I made in there, and not all of them because I don't know. I just can't address every individual one specifically. But I want to talk about this stuff. So let's talk about what I thought about the book. First things first, The Crippled God. What did I think about how The Crippled God just was? One of the predictions that I made was that, frequently actually, was that Tavor and the gang and the rest of everybody else, Cotillion, Shadowthrone, the plan was to bind the Crippled God again, to chain the Crippled God even more than he already was. And I realized how short-sighted that was of me to think that. I can't say that I didn't completely saw it coming because after I read Dust of Dreams, which I think at that point they really didn't tell you what the plan was. I think there were kind of hints that it was going to be different. But after Dust of Dreams, I read a post by somebody somewhere in Discord, I think, saying that is the Crippled God really the big bad of this series? Because that just seems very typical fantasy, and Malazan isn't typical fantasy. So what gives? And I think a lot of the comments were just wait and see. It's fine. And I was like, yeah, you're right. The Crippled God can't be the big bad. So are they really going to change? So that's kind of weird. I never really pursued it. Freeing the Crippled God was brilliant. And the reasons they freed him because of compassion are great. And I'll get into that later. I was not disappointed by this. I saw another post that was talking about how having the Crippled God not as the big bad was disappointing for them. Having the Forkroll Assail, the chain Naruk and Parish Greyhelms, having them as the baddies in the last book kind of felt underwhelming for them because there was all this build up with the Crippled God and they didn't really get the payoff of him as the big bad. And I was like, I don't agree. Realizing that the entire goal the entire time was to free the Crippled God, and that while he wasn't a big bad, he was still doing some sketchy stuff. I think there are definitely some events that I look at in more context now. For instance, the killing of Teberick by, the 13 Tilano Mass or whatever the number is that Karsa released. I believe it was. That event and that whole chain of events, pun intended obviously, I think I can look at in a different light, especially on a reread. And I'll get back to some of these things later because it all ties together. Tavor and Paran. Specifically, let's talk about Tavor first. Tavor is a heartbreaking creature. Even from the first Deca Dragon, even from the Deca Dragons in reading in the beginning of Dust of Dreams, I was like, wow, this is just so sad because her goal, this is her, not necessarily her plan, but she's gotten the Bone Hunters all this way. She's led them this way. And in the end, she's not going to have any play at all. She didn't even get House Shadow, which is what she probably would have gotten if she had been a bigger player. But Tavor, in the end, she was the mother. And Erikson kind of throws this in your face at the end with the snake, or in the middle with the snake coming and calling her the mother. She is the one that raises up the kids and lets them go. She's the one that has the vision and says, here, I'm going to train you in the way that you should go, and you're going to shoot. She aims the bow for a lot of these people. And points them in the right direction, and they end up going sometimes astray, like with the Parish Greyhounds. For a lot of these people, they just end up doing what she wanted them to do and fulfilling the purposes she wanted, which is really great and just adds another layer to her, which is amazing. Her knowing all about Shadowthrone and Cotillion's plan, I did kind of predict that she was in contact with somebody. She wasn't in contact with Shadowthrone and Cotillion directly like I thought she was from the looks of it. But she did have Shadowthrone and Cotillion were likely one of her sources of knowledge because she was a Talon, from my understanding. And as well as to Amber, her girlfriend that died, Like that was, I didn't realize, I had to do a little bit of research afterwards. I didn't realize that Amber was the aerosol that just kind of dipped. So that was kind of interesting to realize afterwards, because like it was sort of explained why she had knowledge, but it was really coyly explained. The whole, I am the child of the Emperor. What more do you need? She was a Talon at some point. Also, like, I did predict that she's not going to find out that she killed her sister. Like, I don't think she's ever going to find out about that in any of the books. I think Erikson purposely left that open. There was a hot minute there that I thought she was going to kill Ganos as well. And I was like, Erikson, you better freaking not. Don't make me cry again. That would have been heartbreaking if it had happened. And I'm so glad she didn't stab her brother. Because that would have been bad. Really bad. And I wouldn't have liked it. I would have come to Erikson's house. It's one of the things that would have made me come to Erikson's house and knock down his door and be like, why? Why did you do this? Why did you break me? Still never going to get over Beak. Paran's powers. Super sick. I loved the whole gate thing. Super OP because teleportation in a not very mobile war is kind of just really just, I'm going to give you this power so you can do lots of things and just bulldoze the competition. I didn't think much about the strategies he could have used. I think if I start pulling the, why didn't you use a portal here thread, that's going to unravel a lot of things possibly. But I'm not going to think about that right now. I'm probably not going to think about that until I reread it and be like, where could have Paran used his people more and more quickly and whatever. So that's a thread that I'm eventually going to pull. Just not right now. That's a landslide of stuff probably. But I really liked the gates. I think that was super cool. Speaking of other bridge burners besides Ganos, who didn't do much in this book. It was, well, he did enough. He did enough. Whiskey Jack. Oh my gosh, that was heartbreaking to see him and his Andy lover reunite. Was great. I'm totally not just referring to her that because I don't remember her name, but that was heartbreaking to see them reunited. It was just great to see Whiskey Jack back and playing some sort of role. Fiddler and Hedge. I have thoughts on Fiddler and Hedge. Resurrection trope is kind of, sometimes it hits and sometimes it misses for me. And so with Fiddler and Hedge, I liked the way that they kind of like made Fiddler depressed. But I feel like he didn't start going through the traumatic process of getting over Hedge until after Hedge got back. And then I did like the way Erikson handled the whole like, look, Hedge, I've moved on. You should be dead. I got over it. You're back. And I just kind of love the back and forth kind of bromance going on there. And Hedge just being like, you're telling me to stay behind, but I ain't. So I'm going to help you out. And he made explosives. That was great. Amazing. Just Hedge and Fiddler are great. So I did like the way that Erikson handled Hedge's resurrection. Yeah, and I think I'll definitely appreciate their character specifically more on the reread. I'm looking forward to getting back to them. And continue on with the Bridge Burner theme. Quick Ben and Kalam. Oh my gosh, Kalam's back. Yes, it was great. Him and his banter with his wife, great. Quick Ben, you're an a-hole, but it's fine. I love seeing them in action. Like, I feel like we sort of see them in Gardens of the Moon, and then they run off. Quick Ben and Kalam. We see them individually in action. We don't see them really work a lot together. A little bit in Bone Hunters, but then they're separated, and they sort of... That's why Bone Hunters is great as well, is because they sort of work together in Bone Hunters, and they support each other as bridge burners. But, like, the day-to-day operations and stuff like that, seeing those two work together in Paran's army was... great. Like, that's a lot of... I think Quick Ben definitely knew a lot, obviously, but still, I think Erikson still managed to maintain Quick Ben's mysteriousness, other than the fact that we know he has 11 souls in him. So I think he's another character I'm going to be paying a very close eye to throughout the rest of the series, throughout the reread. Let's talk about Hood. I think I understand why he's still alive, sort of. It's definitely kind of weird to wrap my head around. Or he was still alive at the beginning of the Crippled God. I'm pretty sure he's dead now. Speaking of death, that tower, the tower was great. I loved the tower scene, the unchaining, the releasing of the heart. Gessler and Stormy, when I started this book, were kind of like in the they're okay tier of characters of the like, they kind of blend in with the rest, unless their skin is being specifically mentioned for reasons. They kind of blend in with the rest of the Malazans. So they didn't really stick out to me other than the fact like, oh, I remember that from the Crippled God and the Cult of Fenrir. But having them in charge of the K'chain Chamale, like starting that process in the last book, I was like, oh, okay. Seeing them together was awesome. I loved their storyline in this. It talked a lot about just, I don't know, like I gotta sit with their storyline more and talk to people about it, because I really liked Stormy and Gessler, and they're definitely top tier characters for me now. Them and then Tavor, both with this book and a little bit of the last book, their characters were highly elevated to like, you know, top tier characters in my mind, because it just, they're great. I like my bromances, can you tell? The Forquerel Assail, good. I'm glad we finally got some good Forquerel Assail stuff in here. Sort of. They still got like slapped constantly. It's just because they're crazy. But I'm glad we finally got them, and seeing them as antagonists was really cool. And seeing the depths of their arrogance was a nice juxtaposition against the theme of compassion. And I'll talk more about this when I get to the themes part of it. Shadowthrone and Cotillion, their plan. They had a plan. This was all their plan. They're the schemers. Yeah, that's one thing that kind of like we saw coming from the beginning. That like, okay, they appeared in the very first scene. I don't think that changed the first scene that much for me, because I think there's definitely a few threads. Like Sari in general didn't even show up. Yeah, she didn't even show up in this book, and she was like the first character in Gardens of the Moon. It's like, where did that go? Oh, dang! I almost forgot to talk about Mother Dark and the whole Lightfall thing. There were some, oh my gosh, were there so amazing speeches around the whole Lightfall arc. It's random and it all ties together, but like Letiste Leosin versus the Sheikh, that was actually kind of just wow. I don't have much background on the conflict. I think they kind of, Erikson tried to tell you a little bit of it. I have a feeling that a lot of the conflict between Leosin and the Andy will be explained more in the Darkness trilogy or whatever it's called. Fall of Light and Forge of Darkness is the only two that are out. So eventually I'll get to that. I may try to read those actually pretty soon. I think I was planning on reading them after the rest of my reread. But I think I might get to them after I read the Path to Ascendancy trilogy. Just to get a little bit more background on that. The survival of the Sheikh and the whole Hust Dragon Sword thing. The Hust Dragon Swords in general were really interesting. That kind of some random fact that popped up in the middle of this. All right, last character real quick. Karsa. Karsa was kind of like, oh hi, oh bye, killed the boar. So it was kind of like, just, I'll see you in the Witness trilogy, buddy. Karsa is definitely a character that grew a lot on me. Most of his page time is in House of Chains, and I didn't really like him in House of Chains. But afterwards, after House of Chains, in the brief snippets we got of him, I came to like him a lot more. That whole scene with the boar appearing in the sky and dying and raining blood, wow, that is what made me look at this series entirely differently, because that had been set up. That had been something that was set up from the very second book. And seeing that was the end of Heberic's journey was really there in book 10, not in Bone Hunters when he was killed. It was wild. I loved it. Everything has changed, because while I thought that killing of Heberic was a very antagonistical act, like the crippled gods trying to prevent something from happening. No, it was actually to do something. It was a more positive action than I thought it was. Still scarring for Crocus, but still it was wild. Let's talk about some themes real quick. Not real quick, sort of quick. Anti-Great Man. This book really hit home his philosophy of not the Great Man. Because a lot of fantasies are proponents of the Great Man theory, which is, one great man can do lots of things. That's the best I can summarize it for you. There are great men out there that do great things and sometimes spur others. And he was like, no, in order for great things to happen, you have to have a lot of people. I think that's I think you could point to a few different characters of just like Tavor, Shadowthrone, Cotillion, of just like these guys kind of spurred a lot of it. But a lot of the work wasn't done by them. A lot of the groundwork, some even of the planning for Tavor just went off on her own essentially, and she wasn't being actively managed by Shadowthrone and Cotillion. And they gave her the knowledge and essentially just kept track of her the entire time. I love that. That's such a unique thing in a fantasy book. It's inspiring to be like, okay, you can write a book that's different from a lot of fantasy books. To tie everything together, or most things together, like Erikson did, and build this living, breathing world was amazing. So I really enjoyed that. Like, oh yeah, Gessler and Stormy released the heart, but that's not it. That's not all, folks. There's still more to come, and Cotillion's plan has still got more to go. Or Shadowthrone's plan has still got more to go. Like, it's not everything. And just the concept of, you know, just because they might look like a bad person doesn't mean they are. Like, you know, Tavor looking on the Crippled God and being like, look, he fell to the earth, and all the gods were like, this is a bad thing. We're gonna chain him. We're gonna keep him. We're gonna try to contain him, beat him up, and all that jazz throughout the ages. And Tavor just being like, no, Tavor's compassion was inspiring. I do think Shadowthrone's plan undercuts it, the theme of compassion. And the reason is because it basically shows you that compassion is manipulable, and that turns into almost the overarching theme. Because Tavor was compassionate on the Crippled God, but she was doing it all to Shadowthrone's and Cotillion's plans. Shadowthrone and Cotillion wanted to get rid of the threat. They were not having compassion on the Crippled God. They were like, you know, this has been the solution for ages and ages, but I don't think this is the actual solution. So let's do something else. It feels like they used the compassion of Tavor more than anything, rather than compassion winning overall. So I feel like that kind of undercut the effect of the compassion themes. I loved Tavor's unwitnessed story, the story of motherhood, the story of just her inspiring these people somehow and sending them forth to accomplish these amazing things, inspiring them through her compassion of the Crippled God, to the point that all of the rest of the Bone Hunters and the Bridge Burners died, or most of them did, outside of Fiddler. He got a happy ending, which was great. He just got to fish, which was well deserved. And the final part I kind of want to talk about is the Parish Greyhelms. They were super interesting to me because it was a portrayal of paralyzed by dogma, essentially. The paralysis of deferring interpretations. And this is interesting because, you know, me as a Christian, you know, the goal is obviously to get other people to believe in Christianity, because this is something that I believe is the truth. This is something that I think everybody should recognize is the truth. I believe that I know how the world was created. I believe that, you know, the Bible is true in what it says. But not all Christians agree on everything in the Bible. There's different interpretations of different things, whether you have, you know, the prosperity gospel, or you have Calvinists that believe that every tiny decision you make is chosen by God. It gets you to wondering if we as Christians have become ineffectual because of our conflicts within the church, within the different denominations. I don't think we're completely ineffectual in terms of conversion. I think a lot of even though some of the just trends in the world kind of go away from Christianity, the moral trends, the Parish Greyhelms are such a great exploration of just like, hey, we're paralyzed because we have so many different interpretations to this dogma that are contradictory, to the point that we can't even function. We can't even do what we came here to do because we don't even know what we came here to do. And I mean, I don't think that Christianity is at odds about what we're supposed to do. It's more how we do it and what specific, there's definitely specific tiny things. But sometimes I feel like we let some of those conflicts get in the way of, you know, just telling people the good news. Yeah. I like the Parish Greyhelms storyline, as sad as it was. Cool. That's all my thoughts. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following along this brief period of just I think the 3 books that I really talked about on here. I will be posting more Malazan content and talking about more Malazan content as I read more. I'm going to start Dancer's Lament in January. So look forward to some content on that. Get some rest, everybody. Good night.